Calumet Editions, an eclectic publisher of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, introduced a new business model nearly a decade ago, in which the publisher and author work as equal partners in a joint venture. Their stable of authors have won numerous and prestigious prizes across literary forms. Where traditional publishers fail to see the value in projects, Calumet cooperates with his authors in realizing a book's potential.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Writer's Corner. And let me explain why this is a special edition. Well, first of all, I'm your guest host, Bill Raker. Normally, I'm a host on Access to Democracy, which is the program that spawned Writer's Corner, but I'm guesting on Writer's Corner today. Second reason is you normally see a couple of noted Minnesota writers sitting up here with the host sitting between them and kind of moderating the discussion between the two writers. We don't have that today. There's only two of us. And the third reason, which is probably more important why this is a special edition, is that the host of Writer's Corner is today's guest, Alan Miller. So Alan, welcome to Writer's Corner.
Thank you, Bill, because I'm very nervous, but
yes, we can see.
Hopefully we'll get through it.
Alan, let's talk a little bit about you and maybe your writing style and some of the things in your career that have brought you to being the writer that you are, and then we'll talk about some of the books that you've written. So let's start with this. I know in your career you've had a number of really important and impactful positions, roles, and experiences. How have those experiences and the things that you've done help prepare you to be a writer? And how has that influenced your writing?
Well, I've basically been writing since I'm 12 years old, I would say, and in a variety of categories: newspapers, magazines, and of course law. I did a lot of writing in law and appellate work. And trial work as well. So each of those things contributed to writing. You know, back in the 80s, it's hard to believe that it's that long ago, I won an award for the best column of the New York Press Association. But I never wrote a novel. I always wanted to write a novel. It was on my bucket list to write a novel. So, in the 1980s, at age 85, I launched into a novel.
Well, what precipitated launching into that next phase of your career? I mean, this is a bucket list item, but it's another accomplishment that you're able to add to your list.
You know, I had the idea for writing a novel back 10, 12 years. In fact, I just spoke to somebody who I haven't spoken to in that long. And he said, "Did you ever write that novel about kidnapping the judge?" And I said, "Yes, as a matter of fact. That's Holding Court. That was the first novel. Right. Came out 3 years ago. Except when I had the idea, we were going to do it about fracking. But fracking has sort of dissipated in terms of importance. So the theme of the judge is still kidnapped, but the theme is around water and the shortage of water and how it's affecting the country. So we've updated the social aspect of it."
Well, it's interesting that you seem to pick stories that are in the headlines, stories and themes that people are familiar with if they're following the news, and you fictionalize those. How do you go about researching what goes into your novels? Because you do a lot of it. They're well researched. Everything is really authentic, except you protect the innocent in your writing. So how do you go about doing that?
A lot of research and a lot of hard work and a lot of thought about what would be the upcoming crisis. I like to focus on social issues or something that people are interested in. I don't want, and it drives the publisher crazy because they say, write a thriller, write a murder mystery. And I might put those elements into my novel, but that's not what I want my novel to be about. Holding Court was about, it was prescient, about the water shortage, and the Colorado River Compact, and the fact that states are fighting over water. Along came the next one, A Reluctant Madonna, which has several side issues in it, but it's really about foreign entities buying up Native American lands in the Dakotas. Also, the idea came to me when I first read about it, and I was about 2 years ahead of the curve on that one. It hit at the same time the book hit. Now, the current book, which just came out a few months ago, Firefight in Shelter Rock, is focused on book banning and censorship. Couldn't be more relevant at the present time. Couldn't be more of a threat to our democracy at the present time.
So you take these leading news stories and you put some characters in them and you put some mystery in them so that they're very readable and very entertaining, but they also convey a message that you're trying to get across.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
Same characters. I have the same characters. My protagonists have been the same people through the three and probably into the fourth.
So I want to ask you about the characters. Mort Ahrens, who's the newspaper reporter, right? And was his fiancée, now it's his wife, Danny Rose, who is a professor of law at American University. Now, is it a coincidence that you picked someone in the newspaper business and someone in the law side of things because you have careers in both of those?
No, it is not a coincidence.
Tell us a little bit about how you bring those together.
As one of our guests on Writer's Corner said just recently, write what you know. And that's where it starts. Holding Court, of course, is devoted a lot to the law and the courtroom. But there are courtroom scenes in all of them, including the new one. Again, I taught in law school, and I utilized that in terms of Danny Rose.
There's some other interesting characters in some of your books. Do they come from your acquaintances and past experiences that get blended in as well? Maybe
Absolutely.
With name changes, but at least there's a reference behind the screen.
There is a certain autobiographical aspect to it. And frankly, it's cheaper than therapy. So,
well, do you consider writing therapy? I was going to ask you one of the questions. Why do you write?
Absolutely therapeutic as far as I am concerned. It's a way to release sometime aggressions and sometime frustrations and sometimes just sheer pleasure.
So how would you characterize your style of writing?
I don't know. I don't know. Eclectic, maybe. I try not to get too sophisticated. I try to use language that we would use in our everyday lives. I try not to get hung up on overly sophisticated problems, but things that we all can relate to and enjoy.
Do you write for an intended audience, a specific market?
Not really.
Well, the three novels that you have out, are very impressive. The storylines are out of the headlines, as we've said. The characters are well developed. Do you see continuing this series with Mort and Danni?
Well, I'm 90 pushing 91. So the question is, do I see continuing, period? Yes. There is a number 4 that's, as a matter of fact, if you looked at my desk right now, there's a map of Washington, D.C. spread all over my desk because I want to get 2 locations exactly right and the streets between them exactly right, which is going to start the next novel.
Well, this is the perfect opportunity, since you've introduced the fact that you have a 4th novel in the conceptual stage anyway, to lay out for our viewers a little bit more about what your writing process is. You know, when do you write? How do you write? Those kinds of components of what you do.
Basically, I try to write in the afternoons for about 2 hours or so. Some of my best ideas come to me in the middle of the night.
I think a lot of writers would say that.
Sometimes Sharon, my wife, will walk into the room and she'll say, are you dozing? Are you taking a nap? Because I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, my hands over my eyes, and I say, no, I'm writing. And it's actually, I'm sitting there trying to envision a particular scene. Maybe I was writing earlier that day and something was troublesome. The research is always a real problem because I try to have everything accurate in terms of cities and geography and locations and not necessarily names, but names that are fictionalized, but that people can recognize the particular locations, as with the current one.
Well, that brings authenticity into the story.
Hopefully.
To do that. So do you, once you have a concept, do you do some outlining of characters and plots so that you kind of have a guide to follow?
Not as much as many of my contemporary authors. I will use bullet points. I will jot down a phrase, a sentence, something like that. At some point, I will try to put it in some sort of chronological order so that it flows correctly. I don't like to do a lot of flashbacks. I like things to run chronologically. But that's pretty much the way it's done, at least for me.
Well, it seems to be working for you very, very well. I mean, you've been very productive. What, 3 years, 3 novels? Is that kind of how it's working now?
1 a year.
Yeah, good. So if you were to have an opportunity to create something out of whole cloth for a novel, where would you go? What would you look for as a theme or a topic?
I think the themes find me. I don't know that I would look for a topic. If I was really courageous, I would take our present political situation in this country and some of the characters who are, they're fictionalized by themselves in real life, and try to do something with it. I don't think I'm that brave, at least not so far. So the next novel is also, it's law related in some degree. There's also probably more trauma in it than have been in the recent efforts. There will be death. There will be certainly mystery, a certain whodunit aspect to it, but I haven't flushed it completely out yet.
So you write about some of the things that people like to read about other people, and not necessarily have to experience themselves.
Oh, well, hopefully, yes.
Right. So as you've explained it, writing is a lot of work. It's hard work.
It's a tremendous amount of work. You don't realize what is involved until you start. And then when you start, you really have to be dedicated. And I really haven't gotten into this next one. I probably will right after the first of the year, which has been the way I've been working so far. But then it's 4, 5, 6 months of hard work every day. You got to be consistent. You've got to really put your mind to it as well as your body.
With that as an explanation, what do you find most challenging about writing, and what do you find most gratifying and most rewarding about it? What's the comparison and the trade-off between those two?
Most gratifying is being able to look at it and satisfy yourself that you've done a good job, that you've told the story, and you like the way it's come out. That's gratification. I am a terrible marketer. It's easier to write them than sell them. And that's not just me, but a lot of writers will tell you that. It's a pleasure to see the complete and completed effort. Frustration along the way where you hit roadblocks. Sometimes you have to take a whole sub-theme and just kill it, as I have had to do several times. Go back and rewrite, write over again. That's frustration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've talked a little bit about the 3 books that you have out. So let's start with the first one, okay, Holding Court. We'll go to The Reluctant Madonna, and then to your latest one, Fireflight at Shelter Rock. Tell us the theme briefly, the summary of the story again in Holding Court.
The kidnapping of a Supreme Court justice to keep him from voting on a very important water issue between government and private industry, corporations. And if they can keep him away from the final vote, which in the lower courts went in favor of the corporations, the Supreme Court will be tied 4-4, and the lower court decision will then be binding. So he's kidnapped with the intent just to keep him away until after the vote, because you can't substitute a Supreme Court judge. You can't bring somebody from a lower court to sit in on it. They have to go through a Senate confirmation, et cetera. So that would be a way for corporate America to succeed and take over control, basically, of one of our most essential needs, water.
So right now is a good time for people to read a novel about the Supreme Court.
There's a lot about the Supreme Court in there.
Right.
Yeah.
So having developed the characters there, you move on to The Reluctant Madonna, or A Reluctant Madonna. What's the storyline, the summary of that one?
Well, again, I was intrigued by the fact that other nations, particularly the Chinese, were buying up a ton of property in the Dakotas, much of it near secure facilities and really locations that we have to worry about foreign governments getting near. And why were they doing this? Why is there no stoppage to it? And interestingly enough, when I started this, which is 3 years ago, it was rampant. 32 states have now imposed laws, and there's also some federal restriction on the fact that they can't just come and buy up our native lands. And it's not just native lands, but in particular, that's where they were hitting. They were hitting the Native Americans because they're basically impoverished. They're basically farmers, and they could come in and buy them out. And I just built an intrigue about that, which there is a surprise in terms of the ending as to what happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, we don't want to give that away.
No.
So now that brings us to your third publication, the newest one, Firefight and Shelter Rock. And you told us a little bit about the theme. Expand on that just a little bit more.
Well, I am really frightened at these organizations that are going around and trying to censor books. There have been 10,000 books listed in the last year with various entities that are trying to, and many of them are Pulitzer Prize winners, some of our best-known authors, and these groups, basically right-wing, in many cases nationalist groups, saying they're unfit for our children, they're unfit for us to read. I don't want anybody telling us what we can read, any more than I want anybody telling a woman how can she use her body. And I just am very worried that between that and censorship, that we are going down a dark road which leads away from democracy and the First Amendment.
And there's a second kind of plot or storyline that deals with freedom of the press or censorship of the press. What's that about?
Well, that's based on a case that took place in Marion, Kansas, and Shelter Rock might be Marion, Kansas, where an attempt was made to shut down a newspaper on phony First Amendment grounds. And they came in, the sheriff came in, wasn't the sheriff, excuse me, it was the local police chief with his entourage, including a bunch of deputy officers. And they just took every piece of equipment out of this place on the grounds that were completely spurious and later proved to be spurious, tried to shut this paper down. It created really a nationwide alert, and the response was overwhelming, and they backed off it in 2 weeks. But it created something that really is dangerous. We've been losing papers right and left as it is. 2,500 papers in the last 3 years have folded and gone out of business as the social world is taking over. But the social world doesn't give us what newspapers can give us in terms of really background and information and accurate information.
When you think about the stories that you tell in your 3 novels, do you see yourself as a crusader in your writings?
No, I don't ride horses that well anymore. I used to, with my, my flag.
Carrying your flag and
charging
your standard.
But I just hope that maybe some people not only will enjoy the reading, but will be alerted to things that are really problems that we should face and address and hopefully correct.
Well, it's interesting that you write novels that have messages in them that people really should be aware of, that transcends the mystery that you're writing in the story, right?
And for instance, the most recent one, Shelter Rock, the firefight, was very difficult to create drama in addition to the censorship and the book banning itself. How can you then create also situations that are interesting to people, that turn it into a mystery in some respects, and certainly something that they want to turn the pages on? And that was the most difficult for me.
And you seem to approach that in one way by talking or writing about the personal lives of the characters, the starring characters you have in your books.
I try. I try. I try to bring them along chronologically. For instance, Mort and Danni now have twins. They were, in the first book, they were engaged and got married at the end. In the second book, the twins arrived. The third book, the twins are now, toddlers, etc. The next book, the twins will probably be airplane pilots. I don't.
Well, Alan, we're coming up on the final 3 minutes or so of this very special program where you're the very special guest. Do you have any advice or perspective that you'd like to share with aspiring writers?
Dedication. You've really got to want to do it. You've got to learn the craft. It's essential that you're accurate. You have to research, research, research. Don't be afraid to throw something away if it doesn't work for you. I go back the second day and I look at what I did the day before. And if it's not worth, adding on to the project, out the window it goes and you start over.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Sounds like it's some advice that you've followed yourself.
It is, certainly in my writing, not necessarily in my personal life, but would that I had in my personal life.
So when you're not writing, I'm sure that you're reading. Who are some of the authors? What are some of the books that you have recently read that you feel meant something to you? And
Well,
are
I'm
you reading one right now?
I'm reading Michael Connelly at the moment, who is a marvelous, marvelous author. One of my favorites is Daniel Silva. I've probably read everything that Hemingway wrote, and we're getting music, and because I forgot to turn off my phone, which is really something that I caution everybody about.
Well, it must be also telling us that we're coming to the close of our program. So once again, we want to thank our viewers for joining us. I want to thank Alan Miller for being the guest on his own program. As I said, he's normally the host sitting here talking with authors, but today...
And he says to his guests, make sure your phones are off, which I didn't do.
We live in a real world, not a perfect world. So, Alan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, a joy talking with you about your work.
Bill, thank you.
And we're looking forward to some more great novels featuring the characters that you've developed with Danni and Mort.
And I thank you again. It's been very unusual being on this side of the desk, so to speak.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all for joining Writer's Corner.